Now, at Christmas in 2019, I picked this radio up in an antique shop, paid way too much for it. Yeah, I kind of liked it, so it was worth the extra money, I guess. It's got some heat or solvent on here and it's damaged that plastic. Someone's put a bit of wire across it. I don't think it's supposed to do that. I'll just move this up with my finger and see if that works. Now this is looking down on the top of the FM module. There's a slug in that adjuster there, and this one here is gone. So I might have to try and get inside that module and just work out what's going on there. Well, there it is there. Oh dear, how am I going to fix that? Okay, so it's in some sort of plastic and the plastic's just fallen apart. I'll unsolder it and I'll see how I can go about repairing it. Well, there it is. There's the slug. It's just a very thin plastic tube with the slug inside, and look at that, maybe 7 wraps of wire on it. So it's pretty simple. Now initially I just thought I'll reinforce this top bit here, but I don't think I can successfully do that. It might be just as easy to do it again, just make a new one up. This former is a little bit larger than it should be. Now I've got some of the correct gauge wire here. I'm going to try and wind this on the former that I have. And I was talking to my friend at the radio club. He said that I'll need to probably put less turns on it to account for the bigger diameter. I've got some on there. I'll just try and space them about the same spacing as they had. The old coil had 8 wraps on it. I've got 8 on here again. I've just put a little bit of super glue on this end one to hold it. Well, here's my effort, and fits in there like that. I'm going to glue it to the case here, or the top of the box here. And I might have to adjust the amount of turns. It's got slightly less turns on it than it did last time, maybe a third of a turn less. Okay, that's glued in. I'll just let it dry for a bit. I don't know if it's going to work, but it looks pretty cool. There's my coil done. I've soldered it onto the little tabs there. Now there's another coil right here, and it's the same deal. It's very thin plastic. So I thought before I put it together I would try and work it in. But as soon as I touched it, the side of the slug came out the side of the former here. So I've sprayed it with WD-40 and I've got the slug to move. So I'll pull it out and I'll flip it around because one end of the slug is damaged now. So that's the damaged end. So I'll put that in first and I should be able to adjust this from the top once the module's back in the radio. I measured the depth of the slug before I pulled it out, so it's about where it was. That's about it. Now I've pretty much got to assemble this back into the radio before I can test it. I can't test it outside. So I'll put it all back together and just hope for the best. The module's in and I've soldered all the wires back on. I'll put the tuning drive wheel on here. Right, it's all back together. This is the adjustment I started to do yesterday. This is the second slug that the one I freed up with WD-40. So I'll just tune this. This will probably be a little bit out because I only roughed it in. It's not that far out, is it? Alright, there it is. Now the next step is this one here where I line up the dial markings. Press button number 6, that's FM. This says 104, mine's 108, the glass on mine. I had a little divot in there to line the pointer up at 108, so I'll use that. Now it says to feed 26 megahertz into the from the signal generator. What they're doing is using harmonics. So 104 divided by 4 equals 26. So they're using the fourth harmonic to get this number here. So we'll feed in 26, it'll have a harmonic at 4 times that and equal 104. Mine's 108, so I need another 4, so that'll be 27. So it'd be 27 megahertz for that one. I don't think my dial's 94, so I'll have to work that out when we get there. This one will be right, 87.5. So I'll feed in a signal of 21.85. So the first thing I need to do is put in 27 megahertz on my signal generator, and I'll adjust this point at 108 on my dial. So there's the 108, and you can see it's got a little raised point there, so that's 108. I got the generator on 27 megahertz. So the adjustment for that is this one. This is C88. Alright, that's that one. Now the next one is 94 to adjust it on, but there's the divot in there. So that's 95, 6, 7, 8, so it's actually 98. So I'll line that up in the middle there. I've just got my calculator out. 98 divided by 4 equals 24.5. Alright, generator's on 24.5. It's this adjuster here. Oops, run out. Okay, that's that. Now the next one is 87.5, which has got a little raised point on it. There we go. Alright, I got the generator on 21.85. This is the coil that I made, so I'll just adjust this one. Wow, that was pretty close to where it should have been. Alright, that'll do, and that's it. Alright, let's give it another go. I've put an FM antenna on. It's not the best FM antenna, but it'll work. Works better than the long wire.
A text message, or you get a phone message, particularly if it's one of those robocalls. It is
we're right on the station.
Message saying that you have been compromised, blah, blah, blah. Just hang up. Because what they're doing now with the coronavirus is they're saying, oh, you've been in a compromised situation, you need to contact us and give us your full details, and if you want your results to be released early, then you need to give us money.
Another scam. So that one's working all right. That sounded good, actually.
Case of coronavirus, the person is linked to the Barella cluster, has been isolating throughout their infectious period. More than 25,000 people were tested. Christmas was a time of severe persecution for Christians in China, with government authorities continuing to crack down on religious activity.
That sounds perfect. Not quite sure why I'm not getting all the stations. I should get more than that. But the two that I normally get are coming in loud and clear and perfect. There's no S's that it was doing, so I'm happy with that.
Churches, believers were also stopped from singing carols in a shopping mall, even though they were officially invited to.
Yeah, so that's good. I'll try it on medium wave.
That's a huge wicket again for Australia. Wickets in consecutive overs. Pujara is out for 50. And India 6 for 195. That leapt a length from... Suspended the account due to the risk of further incitement violence. Mr. Trump's account was suspended for 12 hours on Wednesday.
Alright, well that's working as it was. Now there's some other things I need to do, and then we'll go and have a look at trying to rejuvenate the case. This is the diffuser screen I pulled out earlier, and if you recall it had the corners broken off there. Now I was going to use a bit of lampshade that I've got, but I think I can reuse this. This will be better. It's a little hard to see, but what I've done is put a little doubler on, and I've glued it on in it to just sort of spread the load across the area here, and it's on the back as well. And I've put a little rivet through, the same as they had on the ends there. Now I thought this was too brittle before, but it's pretty good actually, so I'm going to put this back in the set. I assume it had 4 springs. It only had 2 remaining springs down the bottom there, and the top 2 were missing. But what I think I'll do is put springs on the bottom, and I'll just put some wire on the top. I do have springs, but not quite that small. I think the wire will do fine, and I can adjust the height using that. So I'm going to attempt to get this back in here. There you go, that's quite a struggle. I have some hookup wire here, and I'm just going to try and use that on the top instead of, I assume it had springs originally. And I should be able to just lift that enough, bend that hookup wire down, and I'll be able to adjust those. The other one's up here. There we go. Alright, that's it. I'll see how that looks. That's come out pretty good. I don't think I even need to adjust that. It's good. And there's a nice little gap on the bottom for the FM tuning indicator to run. So providing this little sheet holds together, this will be good. I've done as much as I can to the chassis at the moment. I'm going to go out and start working on the case. I've got the case out in the workshop now, and it's just got some minor scuff and damage, some scratches on the top. I want to see if I can just do some local repairs and try and make it look a bit neater. Now here's some of it here, and where it's damaged, it's started to lift the lacquer or whatever's on top of here. It started to lift away from the timber, so I need to get back to some solid timber there. I don't think the timber is damaged. I think the actual veneer underneath is okay. So what I'm thinking of doing is perhaps going around just cleaning up all these areas, drop some lacquer on here and just slowly build it up until it's level, sand it back, and then perhaps give the whole surface another coat of lacquer to just blend it all together, hopefully. Now, as we saw before, this has got the damaged end on it and the cracks in the ribs there. What I'm thinking of doing is pulling this whole case apart. These end bays should come off, they're just screwed in, and I think they'll knock off, I hope. And then I can work on this end bay, and I can do this top surface as well. Looks like these end bays are actually glued in. I think the top was glued in as well, but only at the tip, so it's just taken a little bit of timber off when I pulled it out. I'm really interested to see how this bit of damaged plastic reacts when I try and clean it up with a bit of sandpaper. So I'll do that first, just because I'm curious if it's going to come back with the original brown colour. I'm just concentrating in one bit there to see what happens if I sand it pretty hard. It's sanding up okay, but the damage is deeper than what I thought it would be. So I'm just going to have to keep going. So give me a second, I'll just sand the hell out of it and see what happens. This centre area here is kind of lightened off a bit, so I get the feeling that if I kept going I'd probably be able to remove most of it. I'll go and think about what I'm doing here. Perhaps I'll just go and do the timber top now, but I'll come back to this later and think about it over the next day or so. I worked on this for several hours yesterday. I videoed the whole thing, but I'm not going to bother showing it because I really didn't get anywhere. The damage here is bigger than I thought, and the finish on the top's just sort of chipping away. I can't get a solid edge on it. So in the end I decided I'd paint strip it. I put paint stripper on it, and the paint stripper didn't do anything. It wouldn't touch it. So I don't know what sort of finish this has got on top of it, a 2-pack or a plastic wrap or something. But I don't know what to do now. I sort of think I'm going to have to just sand it back. So just hit it with the sander and just take it right back to the veneer and start again. I just started sanding this and it smells like fiberglass resin. That's exactly what it is. They've coated it in fiberglass resin. Now that I've worked out this is fiberglass, I should be able to heat it and peel it off. And if I can get a start on the edge here, it should just come off. Alright, that came off pretty easy in the end, so it just needs to be sanded back now to smooth it all off, and yeah, it's good. It didn't even scratch it with the scraper too much, I don't think, so yeah, very good. Alright, now I've got to do this bit as well, and I'll come back when it's all done. Once I worked that out, it came off very easily, so all I've got to do now is just sand them up and get them ready to recoat. These have sanded up very, very nicely. Here's that damaged section that was on the front, and it's still got a little divot in it. I'm reluctant to do anything with it. I can't sand it any further. If I fill it, it's going to look like it's filled. So I'm kind of just inclined to put some grain filler on, and then I might have to put a stain on top of this as well, and just hope it sort of blends in. But really, that's the only defect on the timber at all. I'm going to use this sanding sealer this time. I usually use that clear one I have, but I'm going to try this out, see how this goes. The only problem with this is it takes 6 hours to dry, the other one takes an hour, but I've got other things to do. I have used this before and I'm not sure if I liked it or not. But anyway, you just paint it on and let it dry for 6 hours and sand it off. I'll leave these for about 6 hours now and come back and sand them off. While I wait for that sealer to dry, I've gone back to this and I'm using an extremely rough bit of paper. This is about 80 grit, I think. So that's really getting into it now. Now it still needs more work, but that area there is pretty much gone. This is very deep. I don't think I can get rid of that without sort of making a real big divot in the plastic. So I'll keep working at it a bit, but I think I'm going to have to live with that. In here, I don't think I can do much with those either. So I'll just keep working those, try and thin them out again. They've mushroomed over, if you like. So whatever's been on there has melted it over a bit. I've sanded and polished this as well as I can. It's come up pretty good. That part's pretty much gone. You can't really see that. I can't do any more with this or this. I've taken the mushrooming off this ribs here. I just need to finish sanding them up and clean them up properly. But this part and this part, I'm wondering if I can just put some stain on it, wood stain even perhaps, just to try and minimise the amount that it stands out. I have some brown Japan stain here. It's just wood stain, so nothing flash. I'm just going to paint these and see what happens. Okay, that's been a few minutes. I probably won't be able to get it off now. Look at that. No, it's coming off. Yeah, look, it's better and it might work. I've sort of rubbed too much off in places here, like here, but where it's left it on, it's not so bad. So I might try a different way of putting it on. I'm trying this with the rag dipped in a bit of stain there, and I'll just let that dry. That actually looks better. When that dries, I think it'll be a little bit closer to the colour I want. So it's a bit dark at the moment. That's about as good as I'm going to get it, I think. It's still got dirt in there that needs to be all washed out, but I think it'll be alright. These have been drying all day and I've just sanded them back. I ended up at about 400 grit on the final sand. They're very smooth. I hope it's filled the grain. I've got some oak tint here, and I'll just going to tint it because I think it's lost a bit of tint where it's been sanded more heavily than other places. And I'm just going to apply some of this stain. I think it's about the same colour as it was. I've got a fan running and it's drying it faster than I can get it on. I'll leave it for about 30 seconds and that's all it's going to need. This is drying so fast, I'm going to leave it for only a few seconds. In fact, that looks enough. Alright, that'll do. That was hard work. I'll turn that fan off. It's just drying it faster than I can apply it. So I'll let that dry. I've got to do under the lip here as well. So I'll let it dry. I'll turn it over and do that. And I have to do this bottom bar here. Alright, that's done too. I'm going to leave these overnight now, and in the morning I'll put some top coat on. I reckon they'll come up pretty good. Good morning, it's the next day and these boards have been drying overnight. I've run over them with a bit of steel wool just to make sure there was no little rough bits on it. I'm just rubbing it off with a tack cloth. Make sure it's free of any debris. This is an automotive clear acrylic paint. This will work really well. So I'm going to give it a number of coats, then I'll sand it back, a couple more coats, sand it back until I get a nice thick layer. It'll come out, not a mirror, but it'll come out pretty good. I've got to allow 20 minutes between coats, so I'll just do it maybe 3 times. I'll let it dry properly then and I'll sand it back and we'll give it some more coats later on. I have given this 3 coats and it's been drying for about 4 hours. So that's enough. I can rub this back a bit with some very fine, this is 800 grit. Now I spent a few minutes on that, it still needs a bit more. I can go a bit harder than that. I think I might go to 400 grit and do a bit and then I'll come back with the 800 to finish off. I'm happy with that. I'll just do under here as well, very lightly. I don't need to worry too much about that. I've sanded both these back, dried them thoroughly, put a tack cloth across it, and I've let them dry for about half an hour to make sure there's no water left anywhere. I'm going to give it another 3 coats over the next hour and a half. I'll let it dry overnight. We'll come back in the morning and we'll have a look and see how it came out. Alright, it's the next morning and I will sand these back with a bit of 400 grit, then I'm going to polish them and hopefully we'll come up with a pretty good finish. Now as I said, this is 400 grit and this is the European standard 400 grit, not the American standard. I just want to take the top off the finish and it should come out reasonably flat. And then I'll polish it with some automotive polish. I've finished sanding this back. I'm going to cut and polish it. Now these are automotive cut and polishes that you would use on your car. This one's for machine buffings. So this is exactly what you would have used if you'd resprayed your car. This is going to take about 5 minutes of me doing this, so after I've done that I'll come back. We should have a semi-gloss sort of finish. Now, I've been doing this for a little while now. Let's just see what it looks like. That's come up really nice. Very, very nice. Alright. So the next step is to use a cream cut and polish. Now this isn't as heavy as the last one, so this will give it a higher polish. Oh, I've been cutting that back for a few minutes. I'll just see how it comes up. And once again, yeah, that's come up really nice. Well, that's done. I can put another polish on. Actually, there's another level after this, but gee, that looks good enough. I'll carry out the same regime on this one as I did to this one. We'll come back later and I'll put it all together. I've assembled the case back together and cleaned it up, and the top's come up nice, so yeah, it looks pretty good. I've mounted both the speakers in, so that's all done, ready to go. Here's the damaged area here, and yeah, it's not too bad. You don't notice it walking past. So all in all, I'm reasonably happy with that. There's a couple of small items on the chassis to do, and when they're done, I can fit it back into this case. I have a replacement here for this EM80 Magic Eye. This is the Russian version. It's a 6E1P, and it's basically the same. Its pin out and everything's the same. It uses slightly more power in the filament, but it's a bit longer and it's about 1 millimeter bigger diameter. But it fits in my radio okay. I managed to get 2 of these Russian Magic Eyes. I'm all set up. I'll check this Magic Eye.
And Queensland roads already this year. Despite all the information, despite all the awareness, despite all the public safety programs, why on earth is this happening? My next...
Already get a podcast. A lost classic from a New York pop band coming.
These bands have no idea that
that Magic Eye is working. That's on AM. My long wire aerial's just gone so staticky in the last few weeks. I'll try it on FM. You're not getting a lot of action on that Magic Eye there. Yeah. So there's a strong station at the end here, and that'll show what it should do, I think. Yeah, there we go.
We'll see some concerts from them sometime in the future when that's all possible. Compliments of Gus.
Alright, so it is working, and I think it's working properly. But the signals in here are so bad, it's just not activating it enough. I think what I'll do is take it out to the back barbecue area, set it up out there, and see if it works any better. I'm pretty sure it will. This house is steel framed and it just plays havoc with it. I'll set the radio up in the barbecue area. I'll just tune it in. It's on AM.
For Doctors was my way of providing practical support to Victorian
This is working off the loop stick, and the eye is working perfectly.
And what about countries which are at? Foreign communities, things like Blackfellow Twitter and other stuff that are just...
Yeah, so that's working really well there. I'll flick it over to FM. I'll try that. And that's working as well. Still can't get much FM. I've only got a small test lead on there for an antenna, so it's doing well. There's a station up here that's very strong.
I was just telling Dr. Hawthorne.
Yeah, so that's that's really blasting it in there.
6 miles an hour.
I'm happy now that it's working perfectly, so I'll take it inside and I can put it back in its case. There's an earth wire there, that's got to go into there. Now I've managed to get a screw partially in there that'll hold it till I can turn it upside down. So I'll continue to put it in. Alright, that seems about it. I've got to get underneath and put the bolts up from the bottom. I've got to fit these tone switches, and they've got little spaces under here and little earth straps, so a bit fiddly. Let me do these two and I'll come back. I flipped the radio over and I've mounted the switches. It was easier to do it this way than the way I was trying to do it in the first place. So these should go in. I've got the screws in down the bottom and they should just slide over the screws, I hope. There we go. I should be able to do these screws up now. This is a replacement screw. I had to fix the anchor nut behind here. Somebody had chopped the screw off because the screw had become seized in the anchor nut. So I glued the anchor nut back and fitted a new screw. Let's have a look. I'll give it a go. I've got it on FM and I've tuned in a station. Oh, I've got to get it off that. Foreign language station there. I'll just go down the end of this. Alright, the FM's working. I hadn't tested the speakers up until now, so I was a bit concerned they may not work, but they seem to be okay. What have we got here?
It's past as opposed to the present and the future. You know, we saw some amazing speeches around coming together, but there's the AM that's working as well. There's still a few things to do in the back which we'll have a look at now, but gee, it's come up nice. I'm glad I did the wood grain. This is the last thing I need to worry about. This is a thermal overload breaker, so if the transformer starts getting too hot, it will melt a little link that goes in here, spring apart and break the circuit. This is in the primary winding. It took a little bit of time, but I finally found some photos showing the link. Here's one here, and there's a different view of the same link. I also found another guy doing a YouTube video on a similar model. His name is Jim Lindinas, and his model is a bit after this one, but it showed the link. He also showed the schematic for it, and it had that it was made of rose metal. Now rose metal melts at about 100 degrees C as far as I remember. I've ordered some rose metal from the Ukraine. I haven't got it yet, but I'm going to try and reproduce the little brass link they had in there. I've got a little piece of brass in my lathe and I'm just going to face it off. Just use the cut-off tool to dig a little groove in it and then use the cut-off tool to pair it off. I have a bit of brass here. I've bent it around so that the gap is the same height as the little spindle I made. I'll drill a hole right through the brass, and that's just to let the solder sweat onto the little spindle. I've made a little tool to round off the ends using the hole, and I'll narrow it down to the right width at the end there. Now I need to clean that up a bit more, but that's basically what it's going to look like, and I'll solder those two pieces together and I'll be able to clip it into the transformer. There it is. I've got to solder it together when I get the rose metal, but that'll hook in there and under that hook there for the little spindle. So I just need to wait till I get this rose metal, and I expect to get it any day now. Any day now. I left the window open again. Sorry about that. There's paper all over the place now. The parcel's arrived. It showed up about 2 days after the last piece of video was put up. This is it, and it's just in little pellets. Rose's metal is 50% bismuth, 25% tin and 25% lead, and it melts at 98 degrees. So I'm assuming this is going to work just like solder, but I think I'll give it a test before we go ahead. I'm going to try it out on this scrap bit I've got here. This is the same plate that I used to make my little link. So I'm just using a bit of Scara there. And I've got a bit of Baker's soldering flux here. And there's my Rose's metal. And I'll even try and solder a bit of wire on this, see if it sticks. Certainly looks like solder, doesn't it? There you go. We're going to do the real thing. I've got the link mounted in the vise. I'll just put a bit of Baker's soldering flux or fluid on it so that it gets underneath. I'll put a bit of rose metal solder on the top. I'll just flip it over. And I'll do the same to the other side here. I'm trying to heat up the link so that it melts the solder, or at least get some heat into the link.
That looks good. The solders run between the flange and the pinion here, and that's what I was after, to make a nice strong joint. I'll just remove this old fuse wire that's up here. I'll just try and clean up the contacts here, that's all. While the fuse wire is out, this is the contact here, and there's a spring behind it to push it apart. To fit it in, it should just clip around there and then into there. There we go. Nice. I had intended testing this by using a heat gun to melt this up and just see if it let go at 100 degrees. But whoever built the transformer has already done all that testing. I've used the same metal they said to use as a fusible link, so I'm going to leave it. Otherwise I'm going to be chasing bits of solder and link around the room. There's only one part to do, and that's the back. We'll have a look at that now. Here's the backboard here. Each end tucks into the back of the radio, and it's got some tape along the edges where it rubs into the plastic, and it looks all the world to me like hemming tape. So I've raided the wife's sewing box and come up with some hemming tape. I reckon that'll be a good substitute. I'm going to split it in half and go and iron it on. Alright, that's the ironing done for the day. Now these should just slide in here, like that. Then I should be able to flex it enough to push that in there without ruining my little bit of tape. And there's 3 screws to go in. That's it, it's all done. This is a Philips B4X23A-15. And a nice gentleman in the Netherlands gave me a breakdown of the part number to work out where it was made, what year, and which market it was made for. And mine's a -15, according to the gentleman. That should be Poland, but it's got an English glass on the front. The UK model was supposed to be a -5, according to his data. One thing I forgot to mention before I put it all back together is one day I came out and replaced all the capacitors. I couldn't sleep. I thought, no, just get them out of there. I don't know what they are. So I replaced them all and then totally forgot to mention it. Anyway, the radio looks great. I'm glad I did all this timber. There was a bit of work involved in doing it. It's just made such a difference, and the slightly darker timber just really suits it with the dark glass and the brown ends. I reckon it looks terrific. I'll just turn it on. We'll have one last go at it, make sure it does work. Oops, better get her off. I'll just flick it over to AM and check that.
Just want to, just exploring.
Right. Even when you're out surfing,
So there it is. It's working very, very well. And it sounds good. The 2 speakers give it a wider sound field. So yeah, it's a quite good radio. I hope you enjoyed watching this. It was a bit different. There was a couple of little things that are different, like getting the finish off the timber, making a little fusible link out of material I've never heard of. If you did enjoy it, I hope you can join me for my next radio adventure.